I've got 8:50, so I'm going to go ahead. Let's see, my microphone's enabled, obviously my video is working. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to do this for about 10 minutes or so, give people a chance to sort of file in the room and virtually be seated and get ready for keynotes, the actual programming that'll start at 9 a.m. So I do want to thank everybody for being here. This is day two. Day two of a conference is always an interesting one, right? The ones that I've been to, you know, maybe people are a little tired. They were out late the previous evening, dinner, and then whatever they chose to do. Maybe not the case here. I don't know if anyone was out late last night, so we're not seeing tired eyes or tired bodies walk into the conference center. But I really hope you enjoyed day one. We had a lot of people on the site. Tons of people joined us from all over the world. And it was really a great day one. Programming was excellent. Keynote speakers were great. All the speakers really did a great job. So again, it's great to have you back for day two. I'm guessing a number of you were with us on day one, and then a good number of you, I'm sure, are here for the first time. And this is your first day. So again, if you were not with us yesterday, welcome. Again, just going to run through a couple things. Some of them repeat from yesterday. So if you're with us for the intros yesterday, you're going to hear some of the same information. But we do want to get started on the same, really in really from the same place. So this is our 8th year, year 8 of doing all things open. We started this in 2013. I had been in the open source space for a good number of years before starting the conference. I knew it was growing. I knew that people were using open source on their own, and in some cases back 12, 15 years ago in the workplace, much less so than they are today. But again, we've been very fortunate, and we've seen the conference grow year over year tremendously. And this year, we have had thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people register from all over the world. So over the 2 days, we're featuring 200 speakers, more than 200 sessions. And again, things have gone extremely, extremely well. So we hope you enjoyed day two programming today. Why do we do this? Just a really quick recap of why we do it. Open source is really where all the innovation is coming from in the tech world. That's at least our assessment. Maybe not every single bit of it, but most of it is coming out of the open source space. It's because of collaboration. It's because of crowdsourcing, right? The wisdom of the crowds and leveraging the wisdom of people around the world, and you're seeing better technology results. So everyone is benefiting from higher participation rates, more people contributing. We're big believers in that, and we want to enable that via the conference. We use all things open as a vehicle to really catalyze or to facilitate that process. So that's one reason why we do this. We think a conference is a great way to do it. It's also a gateway to opportunity. You hear us, if you've ever attended our live events or attended an event with us before, you know that we truly believe it is a gateway to opportunity. You can just be getting into technology, you can begin to contribute to an open source project. You don't have to write code. You could be a technical writer, you could be a project manager, a designer, you could be in marketing, and you can make great contributions, and you can be recognized for that. That can lead to jobs and career opportunities, friendships, personal relationships that manifest in a variety of ways. So again, getting involved in enabling people, showing people how to get involved is extremely important to us. So again, it's really a gateway to tremendous opportunity. Also, again, the participation and contribution element of this. I think before people really begin to contribute and feel comfortable and really know how to contribute, understanding best practices and how to go about, really engage in the methodologies and the processes is super important. So we try to use our conferences, either the All Things Open platform or the Open Source 101 series, as a way to do that as well. So showing people how to do that and on-ramping them into open source, extremely important in our opinion. And we use our events as a way to do that for sure. So again, that's a little bit about why we do this and a little bit of context for you. A little bit of history. We did this conference for the first time in 2013. We had about 700 people that showed up. It was a great time. Speaker lineup was amazing. We really had a good time. 2014, that number increased to about 1,100, and then we increased pretty dramatically every year after that. 1,700, 2,400, 3,200, 4,100, up to 5,000 last year. We're here live in Raleigh. Of course, I'm in an empty convention center. I'm live from the Raleigh Convention Center. You can see the seating behind me. We're in exactly the same ballroom. We're trying to do exactly the same thing as we would if this were live. But again, so it's not quite the same. We'd much prefer to be here live with you. I would much prefer to be turned the other way as opposed to speaking this way. I'd much prefer to be turning that way and facing full seats that were populated by you. not quite where we are. Again, 5,000 people in 2019, many, many more than that in 2020. We're virtual, but this is going to be a great event. So we have seen some tremendous growth. Why have we seen growth? I think because of our community. Many of you making comments over in the chat feature have been with us for a long time. And by been with us, just friends, just honestly, we view our community, the people in our community as friends. We've developed friendships and business relationships and business partnerships and all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, you're part of the All Things Open community. We really do value you. I don't want to sound overly cliche-ish or anything like that. I don't want to sound hokey, but we really do value you being part of this community. We joke all the time. If you were here, I'd be giving you fist bumps and elbow bumps, and I'd probably put my arm around you a little bit, and I might even give you a hug, an appropriate hug, of course. But we do that a lot here. Our team, we look forward to this every year. And again, it's just part of the community, right? So we truly enjoy you. We miss you, frankly, and we'd love to see you in person, but hopefully we will next year. So it's really because of our community. That's what's enabled us to grow. We're very thankful for that, and we're very appreciative of you being a part of it. I do want to thank our sponsors as well. I would ask that you really go out into the virtual exhibit hall and patronize, kind of visit our sponsors and say hello. Our sponsors are making all of this possible. Without them, it really would not be possible. I've been to events before where they didn't really recognize sponsors, or maybe they were a little hesitant to do it, didn't want to, make it overly corporate or things like that. We've always taken the opposite approach. If someone's supporting us, by extension, they're supporting our community. So they're supporting the open source community, and we want our attendees and our community to be aware of it. They need to know who's willing to sort of, put their money where their mouth is, in order to provide that support. So we've never been shy about it, and today's no different. I do want to thank them profusely, and I want to encourage you to go out to the exhibit hall. Yesterday, our exhibit hall was extremely busy. Lots and lots of visits and badge scans and chats and communication going on. The numbers were tremendous yesterday. I have no doubt that the same will be the case today. So I encourage you to do that and just let them know, thank them and let them know how much you appreciate them making this conference possible. Our speakers and our sponsors make all of this possible. Without them, we would not be able to do it. Also our presenting level sponsors have made the free tickets available. For the first time ever, we've done free tickets. Normally we charge a little bit. We charge a nominal fee normally for attending. We have always kept the price super low, very, very low, as a way to lower the hurdle, lower the barrier to entry, and really make it as easy as possible. We've always extended a lot of scholarships in the past to make it possible for anyone that really wanted to attend to do so. But this year we've lowered that barrier all the way, and our presenting sponsors have made that possible. So I do want to really pay special attention to them and kind of, call them out for special attention, because that support has enabled us. So if you're here and you registered for free, it's because of those 4 presenting sponsors. All of our sponsors are important. They've done a great job, but those 4 have enabled the free ticket opportunity for you. We do have a code of conduct. We're very proud of it. We're adamant about it. We have been from the very beginning. We've been hosting events for 10 to 15 years now. A lot of you have attended our events for more than a decade. It's hard to believe. I used to be the youngest person in the room. Now I'm one of the older people in the room. So that will, all you young folks out there listening and watching, that will happen to you too, I assure you. And it'll happen quicker than you expect. But certainly happened to me. But we've been doing codes of conduct. It's always been extremely important to us. So it will be enforced. Again, we are adamant about it. So just be respectful to one another. Life's hard, especially this year. What a strange year. And life's difficult enough, right? We don't need to add layers of complexity on top of what's already difficult by creating odd, uncomfortable situations and things like that. Again, life is already hard enough. So just be very respectful. That's always a good guideline, a good guidepost to sort of follow. Just, treat people the way you want to be treated. And we certainly encourage that. Our leaderboard. I want to show you a slide very, very quickly. I do want to share my screen. I want to show you the leaderboard from yesterday. Leaderboard's something we're doing for the very first time. We're giving away great prizes. As you're in the virtual platform toggling around and engaging in activity, you're accumulating points. We've never done this before. We've never been virtual before, so we've never been able to do it. But this year we're doing it. It's turned out really well. We didn't know how it would go. We didn't want to, again, do anything too gimmicky or anything like that. So we didn't want to diminish the event or the content, but we also wanted to make it fun. We wanted to turn it, we wanted to gamify it a little bit. We didn't know how it would go, but it's turned out really, really well. So let me show you something. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you a slide really, really quickly. And here's what it is, the winners from yesterday. So the points that were accumulated yesterday were tremendous. So a lot of people were very active on the site. I want to direct your attention over to the left side of that slide. Bottom left, those were our top 5, point accumulators, for lack of a better way of describing it, from yesterday. So Vishal was number 1, finished at the top. Dylan and Stathis and Santosh and Christopher, those were top 5. Over on the right are some of the prizes that we're giving away. So System 76 is making a Lemur Pro available. And then we really tried to choose items that we ourselves would want, that we really place a lot of value in, that we would utilize, and that by extension, we thought you would get a lot of value out of as well. So we didn't want to get, make just a t-shirt available or something like that. We wanted to really give you nice stuff. So Vishal, good news for you. You're going to be notified. You are now, but we're going to reach out to you via email, and we're going to let you know you basically have your pick of all those items that you see. System 76 made free computer, the free laptop available to us. We've actually got 2. So we're going to give away 1 to yesterday's winner, Vishal, maybe you, and then 1 to today's winner. So we're actually breaking the prize distribution up between days. So all of our winners yesterday, we actually start over today. So if you're attending, you begin to accumulate points beginning a few minutes ago, once the site became live, and once you could begin to sort of toggle around, and once programming actually started, that's when you begin to accumulate points. So these were our winners from yesterday. Everybody starts over, starts fresh today, but these prizes are real. So what we're going to do is contact our winners, and we're going to be in touch with them, and then we're going to ship these items out. And again, we're actually covering shipping. And you will receive these items very soon. So again, we just wanted to make it fun for you, but the leaderboard's been a tremendous success. Help desk, if you're on the site today, we're sourcing the help desk. And then 6Connects, our virtual partner platform, they have a technical representative there as well. So your question is either going to be more service oriented, something we can help you with, or it's going to be technical oriented. And in that case, you'll be elevated to a 6Connects person. So they're there as well. So go to the help desk. You'll see help desk clearly marked. We're there to help you out. Speaker follow-up. Our speaker lineup today is remarkable. It's amazing. Our keynote lineup, we get it started right off with some superstars. And then that just continues all day, more than 100. You can follow up with them in the chat within each session, of course, but follow up with them as well. A lot of them will drop an email address in the chat stream in their session. A lot of them will post their Twitter handle or maybe social media. Follow up with them after the event. That's always a good thing. Most speakers that I'm aware of are entirely open to that, and they really enjoy engaging with people both in their session and after the event. Participation certificates, something that we were asked about a lot yesterday. We're making that available for the first time ever. If you are participating today, because we're virtual, we can verify your participation. And if you're looking for CEU credit, or you need something to verify CEUs, the accumulation of CEUs, contact us. We'll extend a certificate to you, and you can use that for verification. You can just send us an email at info@allthingsopen.org, and then maybe subject line participation certificate or certificate. We'll know exactly what you're talking about, and we'll respond very quickly. 2 things I'll end on before we get to Angie Jones, and I'm really excited about Angie speaking because I don't know, she's just really good, and I'll go into that in just a minute. Of course, you already know that. That's why you're here, but I think she's an amazing superstar. So 2 things. I do ask for your patience as you're on the site today. I don't want to sound, I don't know, I hope this doesn't come across as odd or strange. This has been a strange year. I mean, this has been an odd year for everybody. I don't know what else to say. It certainly has been for us. So by transitioning virtual, I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to put it out there. We're having to learn new things ourselves. A lot of us, even on our team, we've done one virtual event before this, but it was a much smaller one. So never anything at this scale. If you'd just be patient with us, you're going to see things wrong. You're going to see things go wrong on the site. I can tell you that. I'm not going to blue sky you. I'm too old to blue sky you, frankly. I've lived too much life to know that things don't happen. They do, and they will today. So just, I ask for your patience and your flexibility, and just bring it to our attention. We'll address it quickly, I promise. And then, we'll try to get you, and we'll try to rectify the situation. But just know that we really are trying our best, as is everybody that's on the site today. The world is just a different place now. I don't know what else to say, and everybody's adjusting and things like that. Final thing, thank you. I really appreciate you being with us. You could be at a ton of other virtual events. So many other virtual events are going on. They're all great. but you've decided to be with us, and again, those numbers will increase, and a lot of people are going to join us throughout the day. We don't take it for granted. It's, again, you're an amazing community. You could be lots of other places, but you've chosen to be with us. So thank you very, very much. We truly, truly appreciate that. With all that said, let's go to our keynotes. This is why you're here. So let's kick this off. Angie, I see you're with us. That's great. So here's what we'll do. Angie Jones is with Applitools, and you probably know her from Test Automation University and a few other things as well. Again, when I said superstar, it's an understatement. It really doesn't do Angie justice. We are, when we're not virtual, we're based in the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. This is an amazing place. Angie, I think you have a tie to the Research Triangle Park, the RTP. So it's kind of home base, I believe, for you, maybe initially, if I'm not mistaken. I hope I'm not off by that. But anyway, it's great to have you with us. You do an amazing job. We're looking forward to your talk. And here's what we're going to do. I'm going to mute my microphone and my camera, and I'm going to go away, and I'm going to yield the virtual stage to you. Okay. So if you want to make sure your microphone, there you go. So Angie, you've done this a time or two before, have you? Yeah. I know you have. So I'm going to go away. I'm going to mute my camera and my microphone and yield it to you. But Angie, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Todd. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you are. So I have a question for you. Have you ever gone on this roller coaster ride where you pour your heart and soul into your code? You feel really proud of yourself once you're done. You submit it for code review, only to be met with comments that are harsh, blunt, and sometimes downright rude. Yep, so many of us can relate to this deflating experience, right? The fact of the matter is that code reviews are a form of feedback, but they often lack that thoughtfulness that would be exercised if critiquing someone on, say, anything else. And trying to make every code reviewer be polite and thoughtful is just a feat I simply don't have the energy to take on. And I realized long ago that I can't change people's actions, but I do have control over my reactions. So I've taken a different approach, and it's worked marvelously on every team I've been on. Okay, sorry, I get to my slides. Right. So with this approach, that's what I'm going to present to you. It's my 10 commandments of navigating code reviews. First one, thou shalt not take it personally. So you can get nasty review comments for various reasons. And let's be honest and state the obvious. Some people are just jerks, right? But some people, they may lack the social skills to be able to give feedback in a constructive way. Some people, they thrive on power, and they get off on having that authority to say ship or no ship. Some people, they pride themselves on being brutally honest, and they don't want to go that extra mile to soften messages. And some people have biases that color the way that they see you. A study of GitHub code reviews show that people are way more critical when they know it's submitted by a woman. And trust me, as a Black female programmer, I've certainly gotten my fair share of rude and patronizing comments when joining a new team, whether it be corporate or open source. But wondering if I'm getting this comment because I'm a woman, or because I'm Black, or because some combination of both, is only going to stress me out. And I imagine other underrepresented demographics may have these same thoughts, and I know a lot of junior developers who do as well. But here's the thing. Dwelling on why you're getting rude code review messages, in my opinion, is a waste of time and energy, and you'll only become further frustrated. Now, don't get me wrong. This sort of treatment is in no way cool or acceptable, but I also don't think fighting each of these reviewers head on will result in the change that we want to see. So, to save my own sanity, I give every reviewer the benefit of the doubt and assume that their comment is directed to the code and not me. Now, one way to avoid taking things personally is to not become married to the code. Take that ring off, okay? Now, I know how much of ourselves we invest into the code that we write, and that passion is great. But if you truly want to commit the best solution possible, you have to be willing to accept that maybe the best solution is not the initial one you submitted. Let's look at an example. Here's an exchange in a given code review. So it says, this is complex for no good reason. You don't have to show off. Less is more. And the submitter replies, this is not me showing off. It's a complex problem and thus warrants a complex solution. Well, it says you can accomplish this same thing with a single while loop. And they say, my solution works just as well. You know, I really worked hard on this. Sad face emoji. Now let's take a step back here. When someone looks at this, you, the submitter, are the one who looks emotional and defensive. The rudeness of the reviewer's comments is overshadowed by the submitter's attachment to that original solution. Now, once you've learned to detach yourself, it becomes a lot easier to actually hear what the reviewers are trying to say, right? So you will avoid going through the torture in your head of, why are they being mean to me? Is it because I'm fill in the blank? And I can't tell you how much stress this helps avoid, because now you can read past the bluntness of the comment and you can see the point that they're trying to make. And now you're free to truly consider it. Is what they're suggesting actually a better solution? If it is, thank them and make the change. So when the reviewer says that you can accomplish the same thing with a single loop, the submitter says, good point. That would be cleaner and remove some of the complexity. Let me work this.
Thank you.
Now, doesn't that sound so much better? Now, having said that, let me acknowledge that more times than not, you probably do have the most optimal solution to the problem you're solving, right? So when someone suggests that you should change your code, don't automatically assume that the person is right. You worked on this for hours, maybe days, and the reviewer is just kind of throwing ideas out there after seeing it for only a couple of minutes. So consider the reviewer's suggestion if you haven't already, but if yours is better, articulate why and do it right there in the code review, because you want all the other reviewers to also know how thorough you are. So the convo could go something like, you could accomplish the same thing with a single while loop, and you reply, yeah, you know, I initially thought the same thing, but I have to also iterate through this list. That led me to this solution, which handles all cases. Look at that. Now, let me tell you, I've seen the rudest people change their tone after I make such a statement. And I've now earned their respect, and I've proven that I'm just as smart as they are, because I originally had that same idea. And you know what? I might even be a little bit smarter because I've considered something that they haven't. So this is a sure way to get people to ease off in future reviews, because they now trust that you know what you're doing. Now, let's say that you've considered their recommendation and you know that's not the best solution, but they don't think that your solution is the best either. What do? Well, you don't get into a heated back and forth exchange. You know, after a few messages, if you can't come to an agreement, it's time to step away from the code review and offer to collaborate offline on the solution. So the exchange could go something like, well, there has to be a simpler approach to this. And then you say something like, I'm all for the simplest approach possible. Let me find some time on your calendar so that we can whiteboard it out. You didn't crumble, and just take their solution. You also didn't get emotional because you are not married to this code. And people will appreciate and respect both of these qualities. Number 6, thou shalt contribute to others' code reviews. Now, if you're always the submitter and never the reviewer, you're going to be perceived as more junior than you probably are. And think about it. The people who are most respected on the projects are who? The ones who are frequently reviewing other people's code. And it doesn't matter if the submitter is more senior than you are. Even better, right? Think about how powerful you become when you're able to help them see something that they didn't before, or you introduce them to some new technique. This is instant dev cred. It also allows you to see other coding styles and techniques, which in turn can make you a stronger programmer and more knowledgeable about the code base that you're contributing to. Number 7, thou shalt treat submitters how thou wants to be treated. Now, when you're reviewing code, remember not to take on the same attitudes that you despise. Just because someone is brutal and leaving comments for you doesn't mean you have to stoop to that level. And I know that this sounds obvious, but listen, I've witnessed levels of pettiness that adults simply should not possess. If someone just ripped you apart in the code review, yeah, it's tempting to return a favor when you see one of their pull requests come through. But don't do it. Be the bigger person and stay true to who you are. Comment on that review the same way you would like others to comment on yours. And who knows? Maybe your charm and professionalism will rub off on them. Number 8, thou shalt not be intimidated by the number of comments. I know that it's super easy to feel like a total amateur when you have a review with tons of comments, right? And things get even worse when there's multiple people making multiple comments. And I'm not going to lie to you, this doesn't look great, but don't count yourself out. Remember, it's code. Don't take it personally. Right? So if you're new to the project, or it's a new language or a new framework or a new library, simply chalk it up to a learning opportunity. Go through each of the comments, review them, defend the solutions that you believe are right, accept the ones that are better. But the key here is to communicate. So I had to do a project in Swift once, and I'd never used that language before. And my first few submissions were riddled with code review comments, even from people who were junior to me, and that stings, right? But I was new to the company as well, so I hadn't yet established a reputation with this team. And it became crucial to me that I didn't become labeled as this emotional woman who doesn't know what she's doing, right? So I had to explain my rationale, but in a non defensive way. So the review went something like this. The reviewer asked, why didn't you just make the functions argument optional and set it to a default value? And I say, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. We don't have that option in Java, which is the language that, I rock. So, I said, I'll make this change and read a bit more about it as well. So this shows you're grateful for their help. You're not dumb, you just are used to another language. And more importantly, you are willing to learn. Number 9, thou shalt not repeat the same mistakes. This is a big one. Pay attention, all right? Because nothing annoys reviewers more than having to tell a person the same thing over and over again. And I've seen code reviews become nastier and nastier when this happens. Now, when you accept someone's recommendation and you make the change, take a moment and internalize why you accepted the recommendation, because there's a lesson in there. And this goes back to making sure you're not blindly accepting recommendations just to get people off your back and get your pull requests accepted. If you're doing this, you may not be processing the why, and the why is the lesson. And once you understand why, you're not likely to make that same mistake in the future. So if the reviewers are not explaining why they are giving you this recommendation, ask them, you know? And when you're reviewing other people's code, always provide rationale with your recommendation. That helps it stick better. Okay. Now, when a reviewer tells you something once and you immediately start incorporating it into your future submissions, people realize you're sharp, and they only have to tell you something one time and you get it. They have no choice but to respect that. And the final commandment is to embrace the nits. So there are people who seem like major nitpickers. If you don't know any, it's probably you, right? And their only comments to you are about misspellings and other trivial things that the linter didn't catch. If you've gotten to this point, congratulations. You've actually managed to write code that your team has no problem with fundamentally. Remember, don't take it personally. Don't roll your eyes and say such and such always has to say something. Such and such probably respects your work and just has an eagle eye. Fix the stupid typo, keep it moving. All right? So there you have it, folks. These are the 10 commandments, and it's the gospel according to Angie. I keep them with me on every team that I work with, and they've not failed me yet. They've helped me to go from newbie contributor to well-respected contributor in a matter of a couple of weeks. So I hope that they work just as well for you. Happy coding.
All right, Angie, thank you very much. So here's what we'll do. You can stop sharing your screen. Yeah, there you go. Stop sharing your screen there. And I will thank you very much. You did a great job, by the way.
Thank you.
Wonderful job. Oh my God. Well, I have heard you speak before, so I sort of knew, I sort of knew what to expect. And I think a lot of people in our audience did know what to expect. And you, gosh, you didn't disappoint. I was watching the comments come in as you were speaking. OMG, that's so true. So true. Oh my God, that's so true. I've been there. I've had that happen. Comment after comment after comment after comment. So I think you're right on the money, and I think your talk's really, really going to help a lot of people. So to our attendees, if you want to pose a question directly to Angie or communicate with her, here's what we've done. Angie, if you would maybe stay around just for a couple minutes, and I'll ask people to pose their questions or comments to you utilizing the Q&A feature. So if you're an attendee, at the bottom of your screen, because we're doing a Zoom webinar, you see three options, three ways to communicate with people. One is Q&A. One is chat, and one is raise your hand. Because we're in a Keynote block, we're not going to do raise your hand, so we're not going to enable anyone's audio or anything like that, but you can utilize 1 and 2, Q&A and chat. If you put a comment or a question in chat, because there are so many going up right now, being posted, they're going to sort of trickle down, and really they're going to probably be lost in the shuffle, because there, again, just a lot of communication and chatter. So if you'd focus your comments and your questions to Q&A, and I'll ask Angie and I'll ask our speakers that once you complete, once you finish your talk, to maybe focus your attention on Q&A and be looking for the questions that come in, within that channel, and the ones that are directed to you. If you don't mind responding, that would be great. But I really, really do appreciate that.
Sure
Angie, great
thing,
job.
Todd. Thank you.
Oh, have a great day. Okay, so with all that said, we're going to go to our second speaker now. Marten Mickos is our second speaker. Security, Angie touched on code reviews, an incredibly important topic. And what we try to do with our Keynote block is really focus on high-level topics that are widely applicable, that impact a lot of people, and we try to feature speakers and talks and abstracts that really hit on those in a way that can deliver a lot of education and a lot of value within a very short period of time. That's our goal. That's kind of our guiding, principles that really lead us to what we try to secure as keynote topics and keynote speakers and things like that. So again, these are right on the money. Security is incredibly important. There's probably not probably not a better expert on planet Earth than Marten on the topic of security. He's CEO of HackerOne. If you haven't heard of HackerOne, you need to go do some research right now and learn more about it, because it's a great organization. They host events around the country and around the world. I would encourage you to check one of those out as well. And maybe Marten will touch on that in just a minute. So Marten, let's see, you're coming to us from the West Coast. I think you're coming to us from San Francisco. So I really appreciate you getting up early. It's very early out there. Maybe you're an early riser, maybe you're not. If you're not, I thank you even more. How about I add a multiplier on that thank you? And thank you twice for being with us. So anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to you to talk about security. And I think the title is Security is Everyone's Responsibility. So with that, I'm going to mute my mic and mute my camera, and I'll yield the virtual platform to you, Marten. But thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for the very warm welcome here to All Things Open. My name is Marten Mickos. I'm the CEO of HackerOne, and I'm here to talk about software and security. Because today, we used to be able to develop software without ever thinking of security, information security or cybersecurity. But today, there's no software you can develop without having to think about how to make it trustworthy, how to make the software secure. So that's what I'm talking about today. And let me share my screen here. I have to find my slides. There we go. Share and present. So as I said, there's no coding anymore that doesn't involve an aspect of security. Whatever we're building for ourselves or for somebody else, for public use or not, we must make sure it's as secure as possible to reduce the risk of cyber breaches, disruptions, any kind of cyber crime that may happen. And I'm Marten Mickos, I'm CEO of HackerOne. I was previously CEO of MySQL, and we learned back then about open source that in open source, some people spend an awful lot of time in order to save money, and they are users. And some spend a lot of money in order to save time, and they become customers. So there was this division into two different types of users in open source. In security, it's a little bit different. Everybody has to spend money, everybody has to spend time. Cybersecurity or information security or just security will not work if not everybody's participating. It's everybody's duty. Everybody's spending a little bit of money and some time to make sure that we reach the cyber hygiene that will keep our systems safe and trustworthy. Because when our systems are not trustworthy, we get all kinds of societal side effects and bad problems in society that seem to not relate to software, but they do relate to software when people can't trust the software they are using. So what is then security? Some people have been thinking that security is about making sure nothing bad ever happens. But there is no absolute level of security. There's no place where cyber risk is zero. It is in the practice of information security is probabilistic risk management. You think about the probability of something bad happening, and you're trying to reduce the likelihood of it. So you're looking for the most economical way of reducing the odds of a cyber breach. Like, how can you make the cost for a criminal go up as high as possible? How can you make the likelihood that your own employees will make a mistake as low as possible? And every day you work on those likelihoods, those percentages, and try to drive them down. They will never reach zero, but if you think they can go to zero, you are already wrong. It's just an everlasting practice of reducing the risk step by step by step. And it starts from when you develop software. See, when you design software, you have to design security in from the start. And we used to never do that. At MySQL, we developed the fastest, most lovable database of the world. We didn't think much about security. We thought about performance, robustness, ease of use, and things like that. But today, everything needs to be secure. So where we have CISOs leading the security work in a company, what does the C really stand for? And of course, we know it stands for chief. But there are two schools that we are seeing. There's the commanding information security officer and the collaborative one. And it's clear that in the past, we had a practice all over the world of thinking that security was something where You had one person in charge of a small group who had unlimited authority to block anything, stop anything, command anything, and the others didn't worry. But you cannot outsource security. It has to be everybody's responsibility. So let's look more closely at it. In the old school, the main principle of cybersecurity was that it's closed, it's confidential, it's exclusive. It's just a small group of certified professionals who will even know what cybersecurity is. But in the new world, we're saying, no, it's open. It has to be open. It has to be inclusive so that everybody can participate. And we have to be transparent about both the problems and the solutions. We have to be transparent with what went wrong and how we fixed it and what we are learning. And when you look at this as an open source developer, you will say, hey, but that's exactly how we do it in open source software. And that is so true. So what HackerOne is doing in security is what open source did to software development, bringing in a model where you're open, you're transparent, you're inclusive, you're collaborative, and you work together with people. You work together with people you disagree with, but you work together with them. And the goal in this new model is the reduction of cyber risk. But in the traditional model, the goal was impenetrability. People thought that you can build an absolute defense on your perimeter. And they were trying to reach compliance against certain standards and laws that you have to be compliant with. Sure, you have to be compliant, and sure, if you can protect your perimeter, nothing bad in that. But that is not the real goal. The real goal is to reduce the risk of any incident or breach or disruption happening anywhere in your digital asset. So in the old world, it was only certified experts who were allowed and invited to do security. Today, it's everybody. It's those who design software, those who develop software, those who test software, those who use software. It's everybody. It's the leadership of a group. It's the ones who are individual contributors, may not even work with software, but they're all using it. And we're all adding to the risk because we have something that can cause a breach to happen. We have credentials, we have access to things. So we have to build this security thinking into the practice of everybody. And that's a change from previous times when we didn't have to worry about security. It wasn't an issue, but it is an issue now. And when we do it, we will switch security from being a cynical guard of rules and sort of a team that says no to a business enabler that allows you to build better software that consumers will trust, that they are more eager to use. So instead of saying danger, stay away from this thing, we say, tell us what you see, let's learn together. And instead of looking for blame when things go wrong, you do a retro and you learn from it. And you're not blaming individual people for what went wrong. This is a practice we've learned from airline safety, where they will do retros on even tiny, tiny deviations in how an airplane is operating or landing, anything, all the details. And they never do it in order to blame people. They do it in order to learn. And they share the information between all airlines, even though they're competitors. We have to learn to do the same with software. And when we do that, the cost won't be unchecked and go through the roof. It will be correlated with the results that we are achieving. So we must democratize security, make it an issue for everybody. In essence, we need to learn from open source. We need to do to security what open source did to software 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and still is doing. We need to legislate cyber hygiene and make sure that it's a requirement on companies that are serving our citizens. We need to fix our software or throw it away. We can't keep going with software that isn't secure. And finally, in education, we shouldn't call it computer science or software engineering if there is no cybersecurity courses involved in it. And imagine today you can take a CS degree without learning anything about security. That's so wrong, it's so stupid, it's so bad. And this is why most of the security experts we have in the world today, ethical hackers, security researchers, all of these, they are self-taught because schools don't really teach security today. So in the future, when we do achieve digital trust, it will be because we are not ignoring hackers anymore. We realize that hackers are good people who are trying to help us. And if they are bad people who are trying to break in, they're not hackers, they're criminals. So ignoring hackers will be viewed as negligence in the future. Security will be collaborative. We'll work together, share our learnings, pool our defenses, because that's the only way to work against an asymmetric threat. And we have to be transparent and open, because it's the only way to build trust in any group. It is the only way to reach a level of trust, is to be open about your shortcomings, your longcomings, whatever strengths, weaknesses you have. Openness leads the way, just as open source has been doing. So in summary, there's just one way to do security, and it is together. By sharing what we are learning, by reviewing each other's code before it is in deployment, after it is deployment, by doing retros of everything that goes on so we can learn and go back earlier in the software development lifecycle to fix the problems we had there and try to eradicate the vulnerabilities and the bugs that we are creating. We will still have weaknesses in our systems. It is not possible for human beings to build something that's completely safe and secure for cyber risk. It's completely impossible. If something has no weaknesses and no vulnerabilities, then it wasn't created by human beings. So when it's human created, it will have weaknesses. The good news is other human beings will see it. They can come in and help. And there are today around 1 million ethical hackers in the world have signed up at HackerOne, will come in and review attack surfaces, try to break into websites, mobile applications, APIs, whatever the blockchain infrastructure, whatever it is, to test it and be the immune system of the internet, where they try to break in and in that way allow you to fix it. Because the best way to avoid getting hacked is to try to get hacked. Because once somebody tries to hack into you and they tell you what they find, you can fix it. So by doing that together, we can create the same positive effect within cybersecurity that open source software created in the world of software. And today, you're stupid if you're not using open source software, and soon you will be seen as negligent if you're not listening to hackers. So thank you for listening today. Hope it was informative. I'll stay around for the Q&A. You have my contact details on this slide. Feel free to reach out, tag me on Twitter, and give me your feedback on what you are learning, how you are solving these problems. I would love to hear from you. Thank you.
Okay, Marten, thank you very much. Thanks for being with us today. I really can't thank you enough. You've been so influential in the open source space for so long, for so many years, and we followed your work for, again, so long. I mentioned that to you before, but it's absolutely the truth. I'd say the same thing to you and about you, even if you weren't on this call and if you weren't delivering a keynote at ATO. Again, it's very admirable, the work that you've done and continue to do at HackerOne. Plus, HackerOne's just a really cool organization. I mean, to have 1 million people contributing and participating and things like that. So I'd encourage anyone watching to get involved in HackerOne. The cause is great, as you just heard from Marten, and it's really a great organization. But thank you very much. Again, thanks for getting up early today. Great, great talk. I can tell you've done this a time or two. You're very much, Angie, and all of our morning keynotes have done this a time or 1,000, and they're very polished and they really do a great job. But Marten, fantastic. Okay,
it's the audience doing it, you know. We are just inspired by the audience. But thank you, thank you.
You are very welcome. Okay, so now we're going to move to Sarah Drasner. Sarah is someone else that we followed her work for a while. What an impressive, I don't know, just what an impressive person. She's, again, VP of Developer Experience at Netlify. She's also a writer for CSS Tricks. We're very familiar with CSS Tricks here. Chris was one of our keynote speakers last year. I know Chris is, really responsible for that site. One of the founders of that site. You're on the Vue core team, Sarah, which is, I think, the topic of your talk this morning. And then what I'm most impressed by is you're a co-organizer for Concatenate Conf, which is an African-based technology conference that Shedrick Akintayo, who was one of our keynote speakers yesterday, referenced in his talk. And I think that focuses on Kenya and Nigeria, if memory serves. but he had talked about that conference, and I knew that you were a co-organizer, and I knew we'd be having you with us today. So it's kind of cool how those two things connect. But anyway, out of everything that you've done, it's not to diminish anything that you've done. Everything's impressive, but I really respect that about you, because that's just very, very cool. So with all that said, it's great to have you. You do a great job. We follow you. Everyone here follows you, and we're super excited when you agreed to speak. I wish it was in person. Again, I'm here at the convention center, and I wish I was, again, turned the other way. And I wish, Sarah, frankly, you were turned the other way, speaking to a packed out audience, but maybe we can do that in 2021. But thank you for getting up early. Thank you for joining us. And with that said, I'll turn it over to you, and I'm going to turn my microphone and my camera off, and the stage is yours. How about that?
Thank you so much, Todd. Can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me? Okay. Let me push play on this. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see some boats? Yes, yes. Cool.
Yes, yep, sure can. You're great.
All right, I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Todd, and all of the organizers of All Things Open for having me. This is such a wonderful conference. I mean, I'm really passionate about open source, so I'm so glad to be here. So why are they having me here today? Well, it might be because they're curious about how View 3 actually works. And thankfully, that's a question I can answer, because otherwise that would be kind of awkward. Today, we're going to go through an animated guide of View 3 reactivities and internals. We're going to go through some really, deep down stuff, but I'm going to introduce it at a kind of high level with some animation so that you can understand what's changing and what's staying the same. As mentioned, I'm Sarah Drasner, or Sarah Edo on Twitter. I'm on the Vue core team. I'm a VP of developer experience at Netlify. As Todd mentioned, I also am a co-organizer of Concatenate, along with amazing people like Codebase on Twitter, Gift, a few other people that you might be aware of. I mentioned that I'm a VP of developer experience at Netlify, which is neither Netflix or Shopify, which is very confusing for my parents. But if you're not familiar with Netlify, it's my favorite way to deploy sites and apps, which is why I asked to work there. We also support a lot of open source projects like React and Kubernetes and Vue and Lodash. So if you're interested in open source support, that is also a good place to do so. So I'm going to walk through everything today, but I want you to know that all the demos for the talk are also open source. They're all written in JavaScript, even though they're animated. I'm going to be showing you some animated things on the screen, but they're all still just JavaScript. It's using a lot of the same premises that we'll be covering, which makes it very meta. I'm going to explain some disparate concepts, sort of in an FAQ format, based on real questions that people ask me. But one thing to note is that the concepts that I'm going to show you are all interrelated. So they work in concert together to create a single experience. So what is reactivity? The canonical example that people usually show, because it's a great one, is an Excel spreadsheet. So if we were to, have a cell that was 2 and 3 and the last one is 5, if we're updating that and we have that sum, it's automatically going to update in that final cell, right? We initially had a sum of 5, but we didn't have to change anything in order to make that 6. We just changed the first value, and then that updated as well. This is not the way that things work in JavaScript. So if I had a value of 2 and I had a sum and it was 5, if my value of 2 I reassign to 3 and then log sum again, it will stay 5. So how do we adjust to changes in JavaScript in terms of reactivity? And reactivity is something that is a kind of programming concept that is bigger than just Vue, but it's really useful for UIs and applications because we do a lot of adjusting to change. So in order to make those changes in JavaScript, we would have to detect if there's a change in one of those values. We'd have to track the function that changes it. We'd have to trigger a function so that it can update that final value. So how does Vue 3 do this? Vue 3 just came out. So how does that do this? We get this done with a thing called proxies. So I made an animated explainer that goes over it. We start with an object. We add a handler and a proxy to the object. In this case, it's the same. But look, we can intercept the object with this proxy. And here's the cool part. If we change the first object, the proxied object updates accordingly without adjusting the handler. With reactivity, we can respond to changes instantly. Cool, that was quick and kind of high level. So let's explore this concept in a little bit more depth and then move on. So let's dive into what proxies are in general. A proxy is an object that encases another object or function and allows you to intercept it. So at its base, here's what it looks like. New proxy, and you pass in the target and the handler. And let's look at what that looks like. So if I have my dinner and the meal is tacos, I can create a handler that basically has this get method that passes in the target and the prop, and we're returning the target prop in square bracket notation. If we get the meal and we say const proxy is the dinner and the handler, and then we console log proxy.meal, what do you think is going to happen? Well, you see tacos is returned. That's awesome because tacos are amazing. But what if we want to intercept this value? And we can actually do that quite easily. So we can console log something like intercepted here or anything that you'd wish. And we still return that, you know, our return prop and target prop and square bracket notation. And cool, if what do we see? We see intercepted and then tacos. So that gives us kind of like a useful way to kind of be involved in that object as we proxy that object. So you can see console.log intercepted, and there we've logged intercepted. So what if we want to do something totally different? We don't necessarily want to do exactly the same thing. We don't have to return the target and prop. We can actually do something completely different. So we can console log, we swapped out your dinner, and I can return burger. And then if I say, you know, proxy.meal, and we say we swapped out your burger, your meal, and that's a burger, and now we're getting a burger. I mean, that's crazy. I don't want a burger, I want a taco. So in JavaScript, that's called a trap. It's because we can do many things, and we can intercept things in many ways. And yeah, it's a trap. We don't necessarily want a burger instead of a taco. So the key here is that we can intercept this in any way that we want. But if you want to use it in the same way, you have to remember to also return that value. Okay, so let's go back to the initial example here. So we're returning with that square bracket notation, but there's another way to extract the value. This is something that only proxies allow us to do. You can say reflex.get and spread the arguments. And one of those arguments that you can add is called receiver. What's important about receiver is that it allows us to bind this properly. That's important because in Vue, we do a lot of binding of this. We have to bind this appropriately in order for Vue to work under the hood. So this is really nice because we have proper binding. So now let's talk about what we might need here in order to make Vue reactive. We mentioned that we might need to track some of those values. So we need a function that will track any changes that occur with these objects, with these properties and values, which is called track in Vue 3, and it saves any changes. Those changes that it saves are then called effects. So now in our set method, we are going to show all of the same things, the target key, but we are also passing in the value, and we're returning that reflect of the set of all of those arguments. But there's one last thing that we can do. Oh, and this is called trigger in Vue. So we're running the changes that have to be updated. And there's one thing that we want to do for efficiency. We want to store the old value and the new value because we want to check if the old value is different from the new value and then run trigger, because we don't necessarily want to run trigger every single time. We only want to run it when something has changed. Cool. So now remember this list. This list is the list of things that we'd have to do to update those values automatically or with some reactive premises. So, okay, looking at this, detect when there's a change in one of the values, we no longer have to do this anymore because proxies is already doing this for us. We're going to track the function that changes it, and this is literally called track in view. We're going to trigger the function so that it can update that final value. And finally, the function that changes it is called effect. So if you need to find any of these methods, the code base is here. Now, in view 2, everything was one single package. In view 3, we split it out into many, many packages. Reactivity is now a package in and of itself, so you can use that separately from all of the rest of Vue. And you might ask, like, why is that necessary? Well, let's say you were working with non-DOM operations, right? There's a lot of stuff that Vue does in order to work with the virtual DOM that you don't necessarily need if you're working with Electron or native development. So that's a separate package so that you can code split and tree shake. And all of the packages are separate now, so you can have an extremely small build. If you'd like to check out any of the things that I mentioned before, you can see them in this package in particular. And if you wanted to look at them for just your life or any other curiosity reasons, that's where they are. Another thing is that proxies are now ES6. Previously, it was ES5 and below. So object.define property was how we used view 3. So view 2, in view 3, we're using proxies. We are making a separate package that's a little bit bigger to support older browsers, but this smaller build supports modern browsers and is really, really performant and efficient. So you can check out all of that work in the Vue Next repo. Cool. So let's dig into how watchers work. If you're familiar with Vue, you might know something about watchers. Watchers are a way to hook into some of that reactivity and adjust to changes. So how do proxies relate to these final DOM updates? How do we hook into them with watchers? So if you're not familiar with watchers, here's how they work. Anytime we change this property, you can see that we're watching the same data property as that counter. So we've got the counter is 0, and then we're watching the counter and we're logging the new value and the old value. And if we increase it or decrease it, you can see I'm watching that property. Anytime the property changes, I can console log, and I can also do a ton of other things, but it gives me access to the new and old versions of the value anytime something changes. So how does this work in Vue 3? Before we dive into that concept, there are a set of base concepts to understand. Get it? Set? Anyway, in order to understand the inner workings, we'll have to cover sets, maps, and weak maps. A set is a series of only values similar to an array, where a particular value can only be inserted once. So what does that mean? If you have something like my lunch items and you have this new set of taco, burger, taco, and you console log my lunch items, the set is really only going to store the taco and the burger. It's going to throw out anything that's redundant. So it's going to throw out my other taco, which is really sad. I can only get that once. A map is sort of like an object. It's got some main differences, but you can think of it similarly because a map is a series of keys and values. But it has some key differences, and it has actually a lot of differences, but we're going to cover the ones that are really pertinent for Vue 3. Key value pairs, remember their explicit ordering. It performs better in scenarios involving frequent additions and removals. Like set, you can only add key value pairs once, and it has some nice methods like size, has, set, clear, delete by the key. This isn't all the things that are different about maps than objects, but we're covering the most crucial ones for our purposes. So just like in set, map, and in new map, in this example for new map, we can't keep the same key value pair twice, right? We saw that in set, where if I have new map.set, lunch 1 is tacos, lunch 2 is burgers, but if I try to log another lunch 1, it will throw it away. I get lunch 1 is tacos, lunch 2 is burgers, and that's it. It doesn't add it again. So the last thing that we're going to talk about is weak map. So it's similar to a map, but the references are held weakly. In other words, if you delete something, the reference can be garbage collected, but in a map, it can't. So this also means that it loses the implicit ordering. It also loses some of those nice methods like has, delete, by the key, you know, size, and etc. But the main difference about weak map that's really crucial to view 3 is garbage, literally garbage, but more like a happy kind of garbage, because we like collecting garbage. This makes view much faster, and I'll show you why. So if we have something like this object here, when you pass an object to a view instance as data, view converts it to a proxy. This proxy enables view to perform dependency tracking and change notification when properties are accessed. There are 2 levels of dependencies for every component. The first level uses map and stores the dependency for every property. The second level uses set to track the effects that will be run when the values change. After the first render, we've tracked a list of dependencies in the property accessed during the render. Conversely, the component becomes a subscriber to each of these properties. When a proxy intercepts a set operation, the property will notify all of the subscribers in the component's re-render. View reactivity efficiently tracks all of the changes in that application. Cool. So that was pretty high level. If you'd like more information, View Mastery does a wonderful job of this. They have a whole course on View 3 reactivity that I suggest you try out. Okay, on to the next. We talked about reactivity and watchers, but how do those properties actually change in the DOM? How are these properties getting reflected? Get it? A little proxy joke in there, in our interfaces. Okay, so now let's cover how does the virtual DOM actually work? You might have heard this phrase before, the virtual DOM or the view DOM. It's a concept that many JavaScript frameworks use to create really performant API UIs. Let's dig in. So here's the DOM. We make a copy in JavaScript called the virtual DOM. We do this because touching the DOM with JavaScript is computationally expensive. While performing updates in JavaScript is cheap, finding the required DOM nodes and updating them with JavaScript is expensive. So we batch calls and change the DOM all at once. The virtual DOM is a lightweight JavaScript object created by this render function. It takes 3 arguments: the element, the object with data, props, attributes, and an array. And the array is where we pass in children, which all have these arguments too. Here's the text in the div, and its child, the UL, and now in turn, the LIs. If we need to update the list items, we do so in JavaScript. And only then do we update the actual DOM. The virtual DOM allows us to make performant updates to our UIs. Cool. But what are the differences between the virtual DOM and something like a server-side rendered application with, say, Nuxt or GridSum? Let's cover that next. So one of the questions that I get frequently is, what is hydration? And when we're working with some of these meta frameworks, it is done in a slightly different way. So, but before we talk about hydration, I want to first cover why it's necessary. So why something like Jamstack? With a client-side rendering solution, the server delivers a file without content until you fetch everything and the browser compiles it. And you're far away from that server, the latency for the request gets bigger. With older server-side rendering solutions, the server compiles and fetches everything, builds the web page, and delivers a fully populated HTML page. That's much faster. However, every time you navigate to a new route, the server has to do it all over again. It has to compile and fetch it and deliver it. This process delays the load, sometimes by whole seconds. Recently, an approach called Jamstack has become popular, which addresses both issues. We build the whole site and deploy the content to CDNs, which means it's geo-replicated around the globe. We never go back to a server on additional requests. We call it Jamstack and not static because it extends beyond static. We can make the page dynamic with API calls or serverless functions, and the user can use it right away. What's more, because there's no server involved, there are fewer attack vectors. That makes Jamstack really performant and secure. So When we're using Jamstack premises and also things like Nuxt and GridSum that are pre-rendered, not only are we having a single point of, not only are we not having a single point of origin server, we don't have to make subsequent requests. It has better security because we don't have access to that single point of origin in the server. So that in turn gives us amazing performance and better security. So if it's statically rendered, here's the part where I get that question about that hydration, right? If it's statically rendered and everything is just rendered on the page, how do you actually interact with it? And that's where hydration comes in. It can speed up performance to initially serve raw HTML and CSS. We can do this by server-side rendering an app and delivering it statically. After it's been served, Vue needs to take over some of the elements that are dynamic. This is called hydration. So since the markup has been rendered, we don't throw it away and recreate it. Instead, we want to hydrate the DOM, just the pieces that are interactive, and make those interactive. Here, the button can now respond to changes, and we can add to the cart. And hydration allows us to create fast and secure sites and still have a reactive UI. Cool. So with these approaches, we can pre-build and pre-render our applications while still serving dynamic content. We learned a lot in, what, 20 minutes? We covered how reactivity works, how Vue 3 uses proxies, how watchers work in Vue 3, how the virtual DOM works in Vue 3, and how and why Nuxt and GridSum are using pre-rendered content and how they then hydrate the DOM. That's fantastic. We now know so much and our boundaries are endless. So if you ever need to access these materials to review, all of the materials are open source on my GitHub at this URL, and all of the slides and the code pens so that you can explore all of the code and all of the animations. But they are also in the Vue docs. I mentioned I'm on the Vue core team, so all of this explanation also lives in the new reactivity system, or in the reactivity section of our brand new documentation for the Vue 3 docs. So now can you not only build performant and beautiful experiences on the web, you understand how all of these reactive premises and concepts are helping keep your users focused on task and enabling them to have superpowers while they're traversing your application. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you. What a great talk. And you're right, a lot within a very short period of time. So you really did a great job. Packing that much in is not easy to do. I've tried to do that in the past, and I've not been able to pull it off nearly as well as you did. So thank you very much. Vue in our world is incredibly popular, right? It's growing in popularity. A lot of people are using it. So that's one reason why, we really wanted you to, speak to the topic or, talk about the topic this morning. So, and what better person to do that than you, right? So I hope all of our attendees enjoyed that. And of course, the recording of the talk will be made available. We'll get editing that probably tomorrow. We'll actually do that right away. So we'll try to get that out as soon as possible. But really great job. Thank you very, very much for joining us. All right. Well, thank you. Okay, so our final speaker in the block is one that I've known of and sort of known for a little while, Chris DeBona with Google. Again, we try to touch on topics in the Keynote block that are widely applicable, very important, and ones that once you know a little bit more about, that can, that knowledge and that additional education can really help you. Open source licensing is really one of those topics. It's often overlooked. A lot of people, I don't know how to say this, really don't pay a lot of attention to it. It's not sexy per se, if I could use that word. It's just not, in some cases, it's not that cool, but it is vital in our experience. It's really, really important. So having Chris, touch on open source licensing is just very important to us. I'll tell you a real quick story before I turn it over to Chris. And it's just something that I think he's aware of, but I don't mean to embarrass him at all. But this is a great story. Again, Chris has been in the space for a little while, like me. I've been in for more than 10 years, 10 to 15 years. I saw Chris speak at a conference in 2009, 11 years ago. It was in South Carolina. It was a Linux fest that actually started out in South Carolina. Anyway, he gave a great talk. He was there representing Google, of course. His talk touched on GWT and Android and Wave and a few things like that, I believe, if memory serves, and that those things, again, give you a little idea as to when that talk was was delivered. But anyway, did a great job. He's a super nice person and funny and engaging. The room was packed, of course. But afterwards, he did something that made a bigger impression on me than really the talk. And it was this. Chris used to be, and obviously still super popular and very well known. But going back 10 years, he's doing some things on TV, This Week in Tech, Leo Laporte. Many of you recognize that name. So again, a lot of people around the country and the world immediately recognizable, knew him and everything. So a lot of people were excited at this conference that he was going to be there speaking. And a gentleman had his son with him, and his son was very young, but he was very much into tech. And I could tell that the father and the son nervously approached Chris, and Chris was probably on his way out. But I happened to be standing there, and I was curious because I'm always interested to see how people are going to respond to, especially speakers and well-known people in the industry are going to respond to people that approach them. And I will tell you this, I didn't know what to expect because I've seen people handle that situation in different ways. But that day, Chris stood there and talked to that father and son for a long time. And Chris, you were so nice to them and so kind, and you were so nice to his son. And I could tell that that meant so much to that man, that you would take the time, and you were so engaging. But I wasn't weirdly listening in. I didn't mean to stalk you all or again, be weird about it. You might have even noticed me, but I couldn't help but overhear some of the conversation. And that made such an impression on me, so much of an impression that 11 years later, I'm telling you about it before you deliver a keynote talk at All Things Open. So being kind matters, and being a really good person really does matter, because you never know who you're influencing. Honestly, I know that's cliche-ish, and I know everybody's heard that, but it is so true. And it made such a big impression on me. Again, 11 years later, I'm still talking about it. So I happen to know you're a really good human being. Not only are you, again, whip smart and you're just very, very, obviously you're sharp and you're very accomplished, but you're just a really good person. And I was watching when no one knew I was watching. And that's always the tell on a really good human being. So I don't mean to, hope that doesn't embarrass you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. You may not have, again, you may not have been expecting that in this context or delivered in that way, but I did want people to know that you're just a good person. And in the end, isn't that all that's really going to matter? And again, I don't mean to wax philosophical this morning at a tech conference, but in the end, that really is sort of all that's going to matter. And that's just super important. So with that, an extended introduction, but Chris, thank you for being with us. We really do appreciate it. You've done a great job, and it's a pleasure to have you. Again, this keynote lineup is unbelievable. And what a great way to end things off. So with that, I'm going to mute my microphone and my camera again, and I'm going to yield the virtual stage to you, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Todd. First, I'd imagine that kid is maybe going into college, streaming his first year of college. I wonder what he turned out to want to do. Anyway, let me share my little presentation here. Just one sec. I think you all should be able to see that by now. Okay. I also want to take an issue with something Todd said. He said that licensing isn't like the coolest thing. I totally disagree. Licensing is and has been a fundamental part of my life and career. And I love software licenses. Even commercial ones. I used to give this talk about how to read a software license, and it's a super fun talk, and maybe I'll re-give it 7 years from now, the next time I speak. Okay, so I also want to thank Angie, Sarah, and Martin. I couldn't have asked for a better cohort of keynote speakers. It was really great listening to y'all. And yeah, so let's get started. So first of all, before I get into the meat of the talk, I like to actually lead my speeches with, well, should I be paying attention to Q&A in chat? No, it blinks too much. I like to lead my speeches with the most recent release of open source software from Alphabet. So just 14 hours ago, our Verily division released a clinical trial simulation tool called Metis. So if you're currently planning a clinical trial for a vaccine for a pandemic or something, they put some really neat work into a set of Jupyter notebooks and tools for basically simulating a clinical trial and for planning a clinical trial. So check it out if you're interested in such things. I'll paste a link in the chat. It's on GitHub under Verily Life Sciences and Metis. So, and it's under the BSD license. So what about licenses? I'm going to talk about open source licenses and why it's really important that we keep them the focal point of what we do in open source. And I know you're thinking, I'm at an open source conference. I already like and know open source licenses, but I like to remind people about the power that these licenses have to do so much more than just let us release some code or put a lens of neutrality on code. They give us so much more than that. And as open source has grown and been normalized in companies and the rest and in how developers work, I think we've sort of forgotten how deep the freedoms offered by these licenses truly are and how far they go. So what makes open source really special when you compare to, like, I don't know, commercial licensing or whatever, is how we get to work with each other. So I've been at Google for about 16 years now, and people ask me, is Google still doing the open source thing? And I'm like, well, yeah, absolutely. Open source has been part of Google since the very beginning. And one of the reasons I have always returned to open source as the primary part of my job is that, you know, I really like to return to open source people. I like people who make free and open source software so much. There are people who have a will to make things better for everyone through software and through computing. And I think that's really special. And it's something that I've wanted to be around, and I keep being around and have been around for my entire career in computer science. And the thing that lets us work together and what lets us build software are the licenses. And that's why when I think of open source, I always like, whenever I see an open source news story or a release on, you know, pick your favorite Reddit, Hacker News, whatever it might be, or on Twitter, I always go, okay, but what license, right? So, because the license tells me what I can do with this code now, right? What I don't have to ask permission to do. So one of the first things I was asked to do at Google when I got there many years ago was to negotiate a license for a computer vision project with a large West Coast research university whose name rhymes with Mamford. So we were discussing who gets to use what, how they get to use the software, who has to give each other what kind of resources. And it took about 11 months before we could just start coding together. And I remember thinking the entire time, like, why are they having the open source guy do this negotiation? This seems like a huge waste of time. If we just had an open source project that we could just work on together, we wouldn't have to do any of this stuff. We wouldn't have to do any of this negotiation. And it wasn't that the negotiation was bad or that anyone was a bad person. It's just open source licenses take all of this and gets all this trickiness out of the way. So, you know, I largely concentrate on doing just that, applying open source licenses and open sourcing stuff for a living. And it's also why Google loves open source software. We don't have to struggle bust through negotiations and waste time. We can just get to work on the things that matter. So open source is pretty popular now, right? And I'm really happy that it's become so normalized in the world of software development. One of the great things about open source licenses is they tell you exactly what they mean. So when I see Apache on a project, everything I need to know about that is right there in the license. I know how I can use it, how I can modify it, what I have to do to distribute it, and everyone else has the same understanding for these prominent licenses. And it's really important. It's why I'm a huge believer in the Debian-free software guidelines and the open source definition. And because they really mean something to me. But more importantly, it's something that belongs to all of us. So there are other licenses out there, right? And they introduce things like, you know, reselling fees or restrictions on cloud providers and all the rest. And they're not wrong or bad or evil or anything. It's just not open source. So when we say an open source project, I think it's important that we're talking about real open source software covered by a real open source license that follow the guidelines from the open source initiative and the open source definition. And these are the guidelines that help us work together. So one of the things about doing open source for a really long time is you kind of start noticing that open source has a gatekeeping problem. And sometimes it's actually pretty intentional. Someone's trying to keep other people out of their project. They just want to do it themselves. They don't want to talk to anybody else, or they want to keep it inside their company. They want to keep control over that inside their company. But sometimes it's just we're so used to operating as we do, we don't realize we're not being inviting or welcoming to new developers and new users. So I can't say a lot of good things about COVID and the pandemic, But one of the things that's happened because of COVID is these events have all gone virtual, and they've started attracting people who are not necessarily the people who would have come to this conference last year or next year. So we'll get people from all over the world who are able to now attend these conferences. And so it's kind of a really great thing. So instead of talking to the same group of people who maybe I would have seen at a given conference last year, I'm able to talk to people all over the world. And here's the thing. I think that open source could be doing a lot better a job of welcoming new users. So we can avoid the unconscious discrimination now, and we can recognize the hostility of doing things the way they've always been done. We can use this time to change. Things like refusing to adopt a code of conduct, or making an assumption that someone has time to search through and scan and scroll up a whole raft of Slack channels, right? Or assuming that they can work in the same time zone as you, or within a couple of hours of your time zone. And none of this is how we make software better together. So my friend Brian Fitzpatrick, he has this great metaphor about open source projects and groups being like circles, right? Once you stand in a big circle and you focus internally on this project, it's actually really, really hard for anyone to break the circle and join, right? So you have to go Pac-Man, as Brian says. You have to go Pac-Man, you have to open up your circle so there's an entry point for others to join. So we've run a couple of programs at Google that are about opening these circles. First is the Summer of Code, and the second is the Season of Docs. They both give people who don't traditionally work on open source software an opportunity to contribute upstream, to learn and get involved in a project. In the last 15 years, we've had 15,000 students from more than 100 countries participate in the Summer of Code, and they've contributed more to 680 projects. And we're in our second year of the Season of Docs, and that's mentoring 80 technical writers this year, and they started with 44 last year. So we shouldn't stop there, though. Everyone should be thinking about how their projects can bring in new users and contributors. Sarah was talking about Vue.js. One of the things, so I make kind of fun of JavaScript for being very fashionable and having lots of frameworks and all the rest. But the thing about JavaScript is they're so welcoming to new developers and new users. And it's so wonderful to see it. And it's something that folks like Sarah should be super proud of, right? Anyways, so I just wanted to point out, we should be wary about how people want to take this amazing thing which is open source and close it up. So they'll take things not covered by the license and use that for control and to add additional restrictions on their open source projects. Like, for a long time, patents weren't even mentioned in most licenses, and now they are. But one thing that most licenses don't address is trademarks. So let me give you some context. Last year alone, Googlers opened more than 150,000 pull requests on more than 70,000 repositories on GitHub. It doesn't even count the thousands of other repositories we work in outside of GitHub, where we host major projects like Android and Chromium. Now that's a lot of open source contributions. And because of that sheer size, we tend to hit problems in open source faster than many. In our office, our open source programs office, we get to use these experiences to help everyone in the open source community, as well as Google. And with trademarks, the problem we hit is that people shipping the software, they need explicit permission to use the trademarks. And this is an unaddressed problem in the licenses. So we recently got together with some key open source contributors and computer scientists to create the Open Usage Commons, which is working on creating trademark guidelines that conform to the open source definition. So let's ask a question. How can you tell if a project is really open source? So let's talk about forking. One of the most powerful things about open source licenses, the real ones, and how you can tell a project is actually open source, is you are able to take that software, fork it, and go your own way. I've heard people threaten to fork projects. People threaten me, like, I'm going to fork this project if you don't do this thing. And I always respond the exact same way. I said, that sounds fantastic. You should totally do that. And it sometimes catches people by surprise. A lot of people have this notion that forks are super, super negative, but forks are an incredibly important, healthy part of open source software. Think about it. So the way I think about this, okay, is every time you ship something to a user, a customer, whatever, that's a fork, right? Because you're basically, you're putting a flag in the ground and saying, okay, we're going to ship this thing, right? It's off the main trunk. It's somewhere out there, and someone's relying on that branch, right? So you just forked software. Congratulations. And that means you're probably going to come up with new features and new tools to work with that fork. And that's super neat. And here's the great thing about open source software licenses. You can do that. And I think our projects become stronger and healthier for that innovation. And it's how we stay relevant with our users. The other reason that forks are not a negative end-all be-all is that open source licenses allow these projects to come back together, that they merge the fork back in. So we had this happen with Linux kernel and Android. There was a time in Android's history, and I know this is going to be super shocking to everyone who's ever used a cell phone, where battery life kind of stunk, right? And Linux and batteries were in this sort of terrible relationship. Android needed a way to tell the kernel, to tell the CPU to mellow out, to not come out of the low power states too aggressively, and to use less battery. Now, at the time, this wasn't actually of much interest in the upstream kernel community that was largely concerned with server workloads. But Android users really, really needed this. So we forked the kernel. And some people were super upset about it. And I remember telling them at the time, listen, we're going to come back together in a couple of years, and we're going to merge the best of both worlds, and we're going to move on from there. So, and that's exactly what happened. It took about 2 or 3 years. But then Wakelocks got pulled into a new kernel structure that allowed for this kind of power management. And, you know, because we were able to fork the kernel and then bring that back into Linux, we now have some 2.5 billion devices running Linux and Android. And that's incredibly powerful. And that was only possible because it's really an open source project that you can fork and innovate with. So, so it's really an honor to be talking to you today. It's an honor to be in the open source community, and I'm really grateful to be talking to you today. So if you remember nothing else from this talk, remember this. The open source license is all the permission you need. With an open source license, you can build the project you want, the community you want to be a part of, and work together with others. So keep that at the center, fork stuff, and have fun. I think that, I don't know if we have time for Q&A. I know Todd had mentioned that we could take questions here at the end.
Chris, I don't think we've got time for like audience Q&A. I think what people will do is here's what I'd like to do. I think you're going to head over to the Google booth in the virtual exhibit hall.
Yep.
I think. So if you could do that, if that's not asking too much, or if that's still in your plan, people can kind of maybe navigate over to the Google booth in the virtual exhibit hall, and they can chat with you there. There's a chat feature. Chris, you'll see people come to the booth, and then if you're an attendee, you want to go over and chat with Chris, you can do that. You'll actually see him there listed as a booth representative for Google, and you all can open up a chat stream there. And Chris, you can also, on your end, you can even activate a video chat with someone if you want to open up a video chat. So I don't want to put that, you know, you don't have to do that. That's not obligatory in any way. Sorry to put that burden on you. And so I certainly don't mean to do that, but you can do that if you choose to do it. So, but thank you very much. Great talk, extremely important topic. Again, once again, I'll say this again, what better person to talk about it, right? Again, fantastic talk. All these talks have been recorded, so we'll make them available post-event. We'll move quickly on that. So if you know anybody that is interested in these topics, and they can always view the recording. So we should have those out. I don't know, we're going to make you know, a few of these a priority simply due to the nature of the topic, and we know the level of interest in these topics as well. So we'll be notifying everyone across social media and then within our community. So please be on the lookout for them. All of our keynote speakers today, thank you very much. The next block begins, the first breakout block begins at 10:30, I think, in about 10 minutes or so. And I know that Angie is still on, and Sarah is still on, and Martin might still be on. He might have gotten off. But if you want to maybe pose the last few questions to Angie and Sarah and Chris, you can do so in the Q&A feature, sort of the Q&A feature up until about 10:30 here. So do that, and if y'all would stick around, that would be great. But thank you for staying around. Angie, thank you for staying around. You've done so for, you know, what, an hour or so after your talk. That's really kind of you to do. I know you're so busy. And Sarah, the same for you. And Chris, you were here before. And then Martin as well. You guys are super, super gracious and just very, very nice people. Let me remind you, there is a help desk on the virtual platform. So if you're with us today as an attendee and you're sort of navigating around and you run into anything that you don't know the answer to, or if you run into, you know, you get stuck, or if you just have a general question, go to the help desk. We do have a 6 Connects technical person standing by if it's more of a technical platform related issue. And then you can pose one to us directly if it's a more programming related issue or service related issue or something like that. We're more than happy to help you out. Let's see if there's anything else. I don't believe there's, oh, one last thing. Do keep in mind the leaderboard. As you're engaging in activity around the site, you're accumulating points. This is something new we're doing this year, but it was super successful yesterday and earlier before we started the keynote block. If you remember, if you were with us, I showed you the winners, the top 5 winners from yesterday. So we started everything from scratch today. We sort of wiped the leaderboard and we started from 0 for everybody today. So be sure to check it out. You can click on the trophy icon and kind of see where you're stacking up and how many points you're accumulating. Kind of a neat thing. Again, we didn't want to, I don't know, be hokey about it or anything like that, but we just kind of thought it was neat and something to do to make the platform more fun. But with all that being said, we'll go ahead and keep this webinar live until 10:30 for another 5 minutes. So if you want to stay on, again, post questions to Sarah, Angie, or Chris in the chat stream. And I know Chris is then heading over to the Google exhibit booth in the virtual exhibit hall. And you can chat with Chris there. So, and then you can always follow up post-event with our speakers directly too via social media, and then maybe even email if they have decided to make that available. But anyway, thank you all. Hope you have a great day. Enjoy your time with us on day 2. Again, if you have any questions or if we can help you, come see us at the help desk. But thank you very much. From Raleigh, I'll sign off. Until 2021, until we do this in person, anybody, I want to invite you to come back in 2021. I'll be facing the other way next year, and hopefully you'll be facing me, and we'll have a face-to-face conversation next year whenever we do this. But here's hoping, 4 fingers crossed, okay? All right, with that, thank you all very much.